Hey there, hi there, ho there. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Great to see you all again. This is Dawn Zoldi. I am your host for the Drones at Dawn podcast. We are here with you again, and we are focusing on drone education, safety, and training this month. So, no better guest to have on than Josh Olds from the Unmanned Safety Institute. It's going to be a great session. I know this because Josh was on our clubhouse last Thursday, and it was an amazing room. So thanks for being here, Josh. Great to see you.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And just a reminder, everybody that's out there, this is live insofar as you can drop your questions, comments, positive encouragement in the Q&A area, and we'll scoop those up and respond as we go. So thanks for joining in, and we'll just rock and roll. So, Josh, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So as a professional background, I started for education. I went to Embry-Riddle. I ended up doing a professional pilot degree, multi-commercial instrument rated. When I finished, the airline industry had just started layoffs. It was an economic downturn back in 2009. So I ended up continuing, got an associate degree in aviation maintenance science. So I did an airframe and power plant mechanics certificates as well. And then when I finished, the airline still hadn't fully recovered. And I, at the time, I had fully intended going aviation, traditional aviation route. The only folks hiring were the unmanned companies or drone. So I ended up going to Textron Unmanned, flew and fixed, instructed on their platform called Aerosonde. From there, I picked up a job. It was a contract position for anti-piracy. So I was in the Indian Ocean flying and fixing unmanned helicopters. And it was really a show of force sort of scenario, really neat operational complexities that you really don't have to deal with anywhere. And so that was really the first foray into a true operation in the BB setting with complex equipment, complex data link, in a unbelievable amount of maintenance issues. So fast forward, ended up coming back to the U.S. I worked at Embry-Riddle for a while in their UAS program, supported their educational program that they have in the state of Florida. And around that time, I started a company called Unmanned Safety Institute. This was around 2014, 15. So it started actually as a services company, and then USI was a spinoff of the services company, and it was focused on aviation safety practices. And the idea was that, this industry was new, it was pre-107. There was a lot of nuances to operating unmanned technology. And we realized that, the aviation safety backgrounds that we had, it all translated into drone operations. And so this Unmanned Safety Institute was developed to really bring that goodness from aviation into the unmanned industry or drone industry. And so fast forward to today, the company Unmanned Safety Institute's been in existence. I was the VP of operations for a long time. And around 2018, I took over as president of Unmanned Safety Institute. And fast forward to today, here we are.
Well, you guys are doing amazing things, and I really want to dig deep into this because we are focused on drone education training and workforce development. And those terms they're different, but they're not mutually exclusive. And I think at USI, you have found a way to weave in all three. So let's kind of break that down, because my understanding, Josh, is that you have, let's call it two different kind of portfolios, right? You've got your focus on education through, even as low as middle schools, I understand, high schools, community colleges, universities, and that's your educational component. And then you have your kind of corporate, professional development, workforce training programs. So let's focus first on the education side of this, and tell us a little bit. So first of all, I understand you're at least in 35 states, right? Explain kind of what your program is and how schools are plugging into it, what you're seeing.
Sure. So the focus of the academic side of the business is workforce development. It is focusing on the knowledge, the skills, and the abilities or attitudes, really, KSAs that are important to the drone pilot world. The FAA came out with Part 107, and that remote pilot cert is really the first step. It's the low-hanging fruit. It's what you need to fly for hire, but there's a lot more skill sets required to really manage the risk, the liability that's being taken on by organizations that are deploying the technology. Um, so from that perspective, we partner with the academic institutions, and the idea is to empower, enable those institutions to provide relevant, safety-oriented skill sets. It's not the end-all, be-all for what somebody needs to know and understand to go enter the workforce, but what it is it's the knowledge and the background that an individual needs to understand to manage the risk, whether it's risk assessment, maybe it's crew briefings, maybe it's components of communication, crew resource management, human factors, ADM. It's all the pieces that go into educating and training a pilot in the traditional aviation world. It's a similar concept. It's just geared towards the drone community. It's geared towards remotely piloted aircraft at the size and complexity of the operation. And so in the academic world, we have secondary education, which, back in 2015, that was primarily in 9th through 12th grade. And what we found over the years is it continues to get pushed down into the middle school environments because they want skilled workforce programs. They want educational content and certifications that are lending itself to employability, and it's maintaining the relevance and applicability so that what they're learning and certifying on in the secondary environment has a direct implication on their ability to either find work upon exiting high school or continuing with advanced standing into the community college or the university environment.
And
The
your,
idea is that we're just enabling.
and I was going to say your programs, they kind of feed each other, right? So to the extent that a school, like let's just say Buena Vista High School, go Colorado, right? Taylor Albrecht out here is working with you. I know, just got that program out at Buena Vista. Those kids come out, they'll get their Part 107, most of them, right? They'll get the certification. And then they'll also get USI special certifications. And those often then will feed right into colleges right here in Colorado that kind of have that next level. Is that right?
Yeah, so the idea is in each state that we enter, it's about creating a network, an infrastructure for pathway programs, meaning that if you start in the secondary environment, you have options as you continue into your future. I mean, the whole idea of this program was to build a framework from which individuals that are earning these educational training certifications, they have options as they progress. And by working with the secondary and the post-secondary environment, we haven't even started talking about the commercial front. The idea is that we're developing an ecosystem inside of a state dynamic where by coordination through the Department of Education, all of the school systems, the way those courses flow, and then looking at it from a risk-based perspective. So in secondary, they're focusing on low-risk operations, but they're getting their RPC. They're learning to fly aircraft that are low risk to a high school, embedding them into their frameworks.
Yep.
Then they're able to transition into the community college environment or the four-year university, depending upon what they want to do with their career. And the idea is as you progress into the collegiate environment, it should be more advanced, more complex risk because you're continuing to level up in what you know and how you're managing that risk as you go. So it may be group 1 technology in the secondary environment and group 2 technology in the community college environment, and then eventually group 3 technology in the university environment. They each bring a new level of risk based upon the complexity of the systems, based upon the complexity of the airspace that they have to operate in. And so by developing this pathway, it gives them the ability to make those decisions to find employment and then go back to college or go to college and then find employment. There's all sorts of options, but it's all tying together.
Now, we talk about this all the time because it's so difficult sometimes to find funding in schools. Maggie Schuster was just on last week, and they were able to get a grant. Now, it wasn't for school, but it's for their Know Before You Fly Your Drone workshops, right, through this North Central Texas Council of Governments, and it was a regional grant. I know that you work with schools oftentimes to help them find grant money, CTE, right? So can you tell everybody what that acronym stands for, CTE, and the fact that there is money out there that teachers and others can use to bring these programs to their schools?
Sure. Yeah. every state is different, but career technical education is key. The reality is drone technology is being utilized across almost every industry cluster in the US. A lot of times it's compared to computer technology in the 90s. It's changing the way that organizations are making money, saving money, or reducing hazard hours. And even from an inspection perspective, the ability to roll out this technology into industry clusters where traditionally aviation technology, aircraft were not normally found. It's really changing the way that employability, the skill sets that are required within these industry clusters. And so career tech ed, many states are now funding industry certification that lends itself to employability. And so the unmanned or drone certification that USI offers, it's safety oriented. It's focused on the liability and the risk management, which many organizations have the risk management departments, their environmental health and safety. It's driving a standard for internal scaffolding of the talent internally. So if you're going to fly an aircraft 20 pounds and under, here's the knowledge and the training you need. And here's the USI certification that equates to. If you're going to fly an aircraft that's a group 2 or a group 3 or in a beyond visual line of sight setting, there's a higher level of education and training that you need to do that. And so the funding sources that are tied to these are different in every state. And there's state funding and there's federal funding. And so at the federal level, some programs will use Perkins funding. It depends on, it all depends upon the school, what kind of programs are available to them. And it also depends on the state and how academic and workforce funding at the state level flows. Not to get into the details of every state, but there's also workforce development dollars. So if you go to the workforce offices in your local regions, many of them have dollars tied to workforce development or career change dollars. And so sometimes it's getting creative with the funding, because in high school, career tech ed, the whole point of those programs is preparing a learner, preparing a student to enter the workforce. That's career technical education. And so sometimes those workforce development dollars are available for that.
Yeah, so everybody out there, I mean, if you're into education or you're interested in these programs, a lot of states have informal groups also of educators and academics that get together to discuss these kinds of things, especially on the STEM side. In Colorado, for example, we just changed the name, and I should know it. It was Aerospace Alley, and now they changed it to something different. But we meet monthly and people cross-level information, and it's really, in fact, Josh was kind of a guest speaker at that, and that was helpful to cross-level, because I know our District 11 here also in Colorado Springs, is using the USI program. So let's transition for a second, Josh, and before we get to the corporate side, the corporate, kind of larger company side of this, let's talk about the individual, because there are people out there listening or will be listening that are just individual drone pilots that, maybe are working on their own, have their own, LLC, or, just a shingle they've hung out. How do they tap into your program? Because it's not just for schools, it's not just for big companies. Like, the individual drone pilot can tap into what you're doing, and there is value added. So can you explain that aspect of your program?
Yeah, so the way the program was built was to have an academic pathway, right? Where you took education, you took training to get to the final certification at each level. We call them stages internal to USI, but it's that aviation risk level. And so for the individual remote pilots that, let's say they would like to get safety certification, we actually had 2 ways to gain certification. The standard is the same. So the educational programs, the certifications are completed through third-party proctored entities. So the test is taken through a proctor. And so the way those exams can be taken are, there's a virtual online component to taking that exam. There's also an experience-based process to basically gaining the capstone of what we call stage 1, which is group 1 aircraft, visual line of sight. It's called Pro Stage 1, Professional Remote Operator Stage 1 Air, and that is actually an experience-based submission. So an individual can come in and submit their flight hours. Let's say they've been flying for a long time, they have hundreds of hours. They can submit logs, and they can submit educational transcripts or CEUs or other professional programs that they've attended for approval to gain. It's almost comparable to like a Part 61 versus a Part 141 training program. The idea is you don't have to go through our training and education programs. In fact, you can just go sit for the certification exams without taking any coursework. It's the way this program has been set up is we're trying to enable the industry. We provide curriculums because we want academic institutions to be able to provide the coursework and the training to prepare a learner to get to the learning objectives required for certification. But if you're an individual that's outside of the program and you want to earn those certifications, but you've been in this industry for a while, you know airspace, you know regulations, you understand the dynamics of good factors, you can come in and just register to take the certification exam separate and apart from coursework.
Well, that's a great way to pivot then to talk about the value add to that, right? Because you talked about for CTE and these schools to be able to get, if the kids don't go to college and take that next level, they have a certification on their resume that means something to industry. Same with the individual pilot that you're just referencing. How do these certifications help individuals, whether a high school graduate, a college graduate, or a remote pilot that's out there working today? And do you guys help them kind of connect with industry in some way? Do you have a career connection that will, kind of incentivize people, not only just for their own professional development and to be better pilots, but also to help them in their employment search?
Yeah, so interestingly, that brings in the commercial side of the dynamic. So everything we're doing in academic, the certifications, the training structures, all of that is equivalent on the commercial side. So everything we're doing on the commercial side for corporate aviation and really departments that are managing their unmanned operations, all of the education and the training standards are identical across the board. Now, there's probably more of it from a scaffolding perspective on the academic side. So there's more contact hours to reach the certification learning objectives. But on the commercial front, it's the same learning objectives, the same exams that are being taken in the commercial front. So we developed a program, it's called Unmanned Connect. And the idea behind this was to pair companies looking for credentials, looking for the individuals that have specific trainings on the safety front. Again, many of their waivers, their BVLOS waivers, or their aircraft trainings that they are operating internally will require a level of USI safety certification. It may be stage 1, it may be stage 2, it could be stage 3, right? And the idea is that Unmanned Connect allows companies to submit job recs, which then we can pair students that have earned those certifications or individuals that have opted into Unmanned Connect with the companies looking for that talent base. And so it's created a unique model where, we 2 months ago, we issued our 10,000 safety certification, which was a huge milestone.
Congratulations. That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you. And they're no small programs. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of education training into every one of those certifications. And so it was a huge milestone because it's created this pipeline of individuals that are geared for the commercial companies as they begin to scale programs. And we're seeing a ton of scale in 2021, just companies starting to explore how they can replicate what they've been doing for years throughout the company. That need for that talent pipeline, that workforce development, the topic of today is I think needed more today than ever.
Yes.
Because there has to be a skill set, there has to be a higher bar set, because the more we can train and prepare this workforce that, we talked last week a little bit about how it's this merger between aviation and technology. I mean, it's a varying degree of skill sets from each of these different fields and industry clusters. And so no one person has all the knowledge to jump into this drone pilot industry. Yeah. And so what we're finding is we're providing this standard that provides the education and the training from both the world of aviation, that professionalism, process, procedure, really merged with this individual that understands technology. They understand the spectrum suite. They understand these terms that are very specific to the drone world. And so by combining those, it's preparing, the future program managers, the pilots that are understanding the risk being taken on as they enter these commercial companies.
Well, and you mentioned how there's kind of been an explosion in your program over the last year. I mean, certainly during COVID, some drone businesses really excelled, some did not. But the point is, people were home, and a lot of your content is online, so it just gave people an opportunity, I think, to take a deep breath, and especially schools that were looking for content. So, you definitely feel a need. And Josh, as we now are looking at the Beyond Visual Line of Sight, advisory rulemaking committee in action, and hopefully some, at least draft rules maybe by early 2022 or mid 2022. The need for this is just going to just continue to increase. I mean, you mentioned you were doing anti-piracy missions, right? But people are using these for cinematography, right? And everything in between. So, this idea that being an airman and having these basic skills is really critical, and we're going to need more of it. So, thanks for what you're doing. And, another thing we need in this industry is diversity, and I want to kind of pivot and talk about that for a second, because I know that's something that's very important to USI. In fact, everybody out there, I want to brag on them for a second. If you didn't know, Unmanned Safety Institute has sponsored the Women in Drones, Women to Watch 5th anniversary global awards program, and they are sponsoring specifically the individual education award. So it's the Unmanned Safety Institute Education Award. So thank you for doing that, because of what you've done, and other companies. We're going to be able to provide micro grants this year to those award recipients. So we're really excited about that. So tell us a little, Josh, about some other things you guys are doing in this area, and how you're trying to increase diversity, equity, inclusion in the unmanned career fields.
Yeah, well, it's incredibly important to us because drone technology has created this opportunity. It's low-hanging fruit for entrance into the aviation industry, which, for all intents and purposes, obtaining a private pilot license is expensive. And it's expensive, and it takes a ton of time. And so the drone industry has created this opportunity to really introduce students of every kind of background. Diversity is a very important to the industry. It brings new backgrounds, new perspectives, new cultures into this field of aviation that honestly every day is problem solving. It's figuring out new ways to address unmanned technology, drone technology into different industry clusters. And so this diversity inclusion initiative is important because this technology and USI having a platform to enable programs to employ this technology to train and educate our next generation from a workforce perspective. Everything was built on this ab initio learn. Somebody with no background in aviation or no background in technology to be able to progress through this program. As a company, we work in some of the ruralist and really some regions that are economically depressed for whatever reason. And so the ability to roll out a program like this, which takes somebody that didn't really have an opportunity to enter the aviation industry and provide them the opportunity with not just curriculum, but materials that's truly walking them through what it means to be a professional aviator in the drone space. It's amazing to watch the success coming out of these programs, the interest that's garnered when you put a piece of drone technology in the hands of somebody that wants to enter this space. It's an incredible opportunity. It's an incredible platform to engage, this future generation, this future workforce. And it's truly, the students that are going to enter this workforce today are sitting in secondary education today. I mean, they're in high school, and they're going to be the leaders of this industry in the future. And so it's really this opportunity that we're just so excited to be part of. We're excited to be contributing to, and we just appreciate the opportunity to.
Yeah, no, really thankful for that, and it's going to be great. We're still figuring out. We should expect an announcement in the next couple of weeks of where we're going to be kind of announcing those awards. We've had to pivot, unfortunately, with the cancellation of Interdrone, but no, it's going to be equally awesome. So more to follow there, and thanks again for what you're doing. So important. So let's talk in the last couple minutes here, Josh, about maybe some of the upcoming projects you have going on. I'm smiling and laughing because we both know that I just finished a book for you. So, and that's also turning into coursework. So tell us a little bit about some of the projects you have on your horizon.
So we're actually really excited about this project as well. We've commissioned Dawn Zoldi herself to write a book, which we see incredibly important to really the commercial industry, but also this future generation that we just talked about. This need to understand how rulemaking works, how waivers work, in this legal aspect, the business aspects of this industry. And we see it incredibly important to a lot of organizations that are developing these centers of excellence, or it's a working group of individuals inside of the company that are all communicating and coordinating on what unmanned technology rollout within a company looks like. And so this book addresses all of the topics tied to that. We're excited to be releasing it. September 1st is going to be the official launch. We have programs baiting it this year. It'll be fully launched in the spring. And the hope in the, I guess the goal of this content is going to be to one, have an educational arm of rolling out this education inside of colleges and inside of high schools even. And then on the commercial side, it's going to be program managers, legal, because legal counsels on every one of these UAS committees, but to truly understand the complexities that unmanned aircraft drone technology has brought to organizations worldwide.
Yeah, I'm so excited too. I mean, we talk about this a lot, but I can't stop smiling when I talk about it because it was so like fun and such a joy to write it. It was like my 30 years experience between the military and being a lawyer, and also an adjunct professor, history major, all of this, business matters attorney, all of it rolled into this one book, and just a ton of fun to write it. And I can't wait to see how it's received, because it's almost like I poured my entire brain into this book. So we'll see how it goes. But I really appreciate the opportunity, because being a teacher, and I'm an adjunct professor at CSU Pueblo. And as I was writing it, I was thinking, how would I teach this class? And so that really guided my thinking in, like you said, the KSAs, or the learning objectives, and what's important. What do people need to take away from this? Because honestly, as I teach kids, I call them kids, but they're not, right? They're young adults. Just civics 101, like our three branches of government, people don't know what the legislative branch does. And so it's just like, whoa, so we start there, right, in the book with chapter 1, and how the aviation, kind of regulations all feed out of this, and it all goes back to the Constitution. So excited about this. Can't wait to see the final version, and really excited. So what else, Josh, do you kind of have on the horizon? Like, what are your goals? We talked about BV loss, maybe brewing, and maybe some other content coming down the pike, maybe in the next 6-12 months, besides the book we're talking about that you and I worked on together.
So BV loss is, I think, on everyone's minds.
Absolutely.
Honestly, as a company, that's what USI developed, everything we developed, because that's the true capability of drone technology, is this ability to operate them downrange. But there are many, many nuances in operating that kind of technology downrange, everything from the data link to encryption to the ability
Weather.
to...
I mean, weather.
Weather.
I mean,
Well,
like who would really think about that? But how critical, and that low altitude weather. I've been talking to people about this separately, and how it's almost a mystery. Like they're still trying to figure all that out, and how does that work? And that's very significant.
well, in the weather research that's being done at
Yeah.
low level altitudes, I mean, look, as an industry, we have research from 500 feet and above. I mean, that's all we've been researching for years and years
Exactly.
and years, because
Exactly.
that's where aviation is operating, right? So
Yes.
all of these climate boundary layers that exist have been researched almost to death, right? But then we look at 500 feet and below, there's very little research done in terms of the boundary layer 400 feet and below. And there's some really interesting research being done in this space. Dr. Kevin Adkins out of Embry-Riddle has some incredible research for low level boundary layer type of research. But the eddy currents that exist, the buildings, the way wind flows around trees, and
Yes.
it is an incredible microclimate below that level. And as we start talking about scaling aircraft and BV loss and operating advanced air mobility at low levels,
Absolutely.
all of this is going to come into play. And so it's complex. There's a lot of research that needs to be done. There's a lot of technological pieces that need to be fixed. It's not even, I say fixed, but I mean thought through. One of the big pieces is GPS, right? A lot of these aircraft are dependent upon GPS. And so the aircraft can be an absolutely perfect machine. But if you lose GPS and the aircraft's dependent upon GPS for any length of time, this was always a big issue in flying BV loss. When you lose GPS, even if you have a magnetometer, right, it starts to deviate over time. And so the longer you lost comms with that aircraft or positional precision,
Yeah.
that aircraft could be anywhere on the map. And so you start to lose the positioning. And so there's just so many operational pieces that go into it. So that's our next big focus, is that
Yeah,
education.
that's huge, Josh. And the GPS aspect. I mean, I've been writing about that for Inside GNSS since October. And it's not something that I knew a lot about until I had to really start digging deep to write about it. And the complementary position, navigation, timing, research is being done by the Department of Transportation, DHS, DoD. In fact, I would commend everybody to go out and check out my website, P3 Tech Consulting, Inside GNSS. I've got a tab. All my articles are up there, and they kind of summarize all the latest reports as they come out. So really big deal, because GPS doesn't just fly our planes. It's virtually controls everything in our lives, almost all of our critical infrastructure, and it is vulnerable. So very, very interesting stuff, Josh, to be teaching people about, because like you said, even things like spectrum, I mean, who knows about significant. And so I love that you're jumping into all of these topics, because they're topics that, you just buy a drone and you get your 107, or you take your trust test as a rec flyer. You don't think about these things, but they're important and they're out there. Things like weather. You mentioned, I got to shamelessly plug Dr. Brian Argro from CU Boulder. His team out there at the Smead Institute has been doing amazing weather research. He was on Clubhouse a couple of weeks ago, and down the line, we're gonna have an R&D month. We'll talk about the transition of this podcast here shortly. But anyway, so Josh, we got maybe a couple minutes left. I don't know if you want to kind of do your 30-second elevator speech summary and let people know how they can reach you, how they can tap into Unmanned Safety Institute before we kind of start winding down.
Yeah, I think the last 30 seconds, I think the key is industry coordination, right? As a company, our whole vision, our mission is to help empower and enable our future workforce. And it's helping our current organizations that are deploying technology now scale, set a foundation to scale with the technology as regulations continue to come out. And again, it's taken a long time to get to BV loss, but when it happens, we're going to see this industry that's very exciting, it's very nascent, just scale like crazy. And to do that, we've got to have a workforce that understands the technology. I mean, understanding GPS, understanding data link, the electromagnetic spectrum, all of these pieces that play into not just aviation, but the technology components of these aircraft are incredibly important. So this industry is about collaboration. It's about working together. Rising tides lift all boats. It's cliche, but it's incredibly true in this space. USI is working with OEMs to develop standardized training programs for OEM aircraft, and that is helping with, again, setting a standard in terms of how does somebody fly an aircraft and what do they need to know to fly it safely. Every aircraft is different in this space. There's really no standard to the graphical user interface, and so it's not like a six-pack aircraft. Every aircraft is being trained differently, which is creating its own complexities from a training and education perspective. But I just appreciate you having me here. If you want to reach out, you can reach out to me directly. info@unmannedsafetyinstitute.org is our primary address, and we can get you connected with somebody to talk through. We're extremely collaborative as a company, open to any suggestions and feedback.
Yeah, that's terrific. And thanks so much, Josh, for being here. I mean, obviously I'm a huge fan. That's why I'm working with you. I mean, that's the beauty of having my own company is I get to actually pick who I work with. And, so my partners, I pick them carefully, and you guys have been great. And I definitely recommend anybody that's out there that needs the certification programs, interested in enhancing the workforce development of their company or bringing this to a school, to reach out to Josh, because I've been a party to some of those conversations and they usually go really, really well. So thank you again, Josh. And sticking on this theme, next week we will have with us a little bit different, a spin, but the Drone Service Providers Alliance, DSPA, Vic Moss. I think Kenji Sugahara is going to make it. I keep getting confused, which I know for sure Vic will be here. But they provide drone training and information more from an advocacy standpoint. So they're trying to elevate the industry by their participation in the Drone Advisory Committee, and now Kenji's on the ARC, the BVLOS ARC, and they feed that information back directly to industry and to pilots, and take that feedback and go back. So that feedback loop and that constant education and training of folks out there, I think, is so important. So Vic also, by the way, will be on our Clubhouse this Thursday, Drone Law Connections. If you're not on there, follow us. That's 11 a.m. Mountain and 1 p.m. Eastern this Thursday with Vic Moss. And then he'll be on, like I said, this podcast next Monday. Just throw out the quick teaser, and then we'll sign off. This month will be our last month with Drones at Dawn. There will be a podcast, a new one coming out in August, but I'll just throw that out there as a teaser. So stick with me. We're gonna keep the party going. Keep the show must go on, and it's just going to be a little different. So really excited about the transition, but this has been really an honor working with Interdrone this whole time, and so it's bittersweet, really, to have to transition, but it's been awesome. And thank you so much, Josh, and thank you again, Interdrone, and thanks everybody that dialed in. Hope to see you next week out here. Have a great week.